This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and exciting times here. Another NVIDIA 10 series card inside of a laptop. This time we have the more powerful NVIDIA GTX 1070M. That's the equivalent of the 980 series in the old parlance, so it's very powerful, and it's pretty impressive to find in this Asus ROG Strix GL502. Now, this is not a brand new model overall. They had one before it came out about a year ago or so with the 9 series graphics, but they've updated with 10. They've made some improvements inside. What's really impressive is usually when you're looking at something with 1070 performance, you're not looking at the thin and lights anymore. You're looking at the big honkin' 17 inches mostly. This is a 15 inch that weighs only 5 pounds or 2.2 kilograms. That's a lot of horsepower, folks, and it's good. Core i7 quad-core performance, 1080p display, nice quality, all sorts of exciting things, and the price is a lot more amenable too than, say, something like the ROG G752, which can be easily $2,000 to $2,500 for largely a similar configuration. This one's only $1,699. We're going to look at it now. And first, a word from our sponsor for this video. It's Braintree Payments. And we want to thank them for their support. It's not easy developing commercial mobile apps, but that doesn't mean accepting payments has to be hard too. Braintree makes integrating mobile payments a breeze. They allow you to accept nearly any kind of payment from any device with a single integration, even PayPal, Android Pay, and whatever is the next big thing in payments. Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients are supported, as are payments in a variety of currencies. Their code is elegant and clearly documented. They have a simple and flexible SDK that makes your job accepting payments easier. Learn more at braintreepayments.com/tech-review. Now back to our ROG review. In terms of specs, you're looking at Intel Core i7-6700HQ, which isn't just about every gaming laptop unless you get an overclockable model. That's Skylake. That's still the newest generation available. It uses the HM170 Intel chipset for those who are more technically minded. An improvement that Asus made is it has 2 RAM slots. The previous version of this had only 1, so that gives you more expandability, obviously, in setting up memory in dual channel if you want. It has 2 RAM slots, and our model with 16 gigs of RAM had one 16 gig Samsung module in there, DDR4, so that's nice. You don't have to throw away your old RAM if you're going to upgrade and you want to go to 32 gigs, for example. You just buy one module. Also improved is it has an M2 SSD slot. That's the same PCIe with support for NVMe, but this time they actually put a better SSD in there. Previously, they were shipping it mostly with a SATA SSD. Now, M2 and SATA and PCIe, these are the M2 is the connector. PCIe and SATA are 2 different protocols. So for those of you who still get confused by that, PCIe NVMe is currently the fastest, and ours came with a Samsung SM951 SSD in there, 256 gig. That's pretty good stuff. And you get a terabyte, 2.5-inch hard drive, 7,200 RPM. And you know what I would do, because they're pretty affordable these days, is replace that with a 2.5-inch SSD. You can get a 512 gig for around $200 or less these days. Totally worth it. Your games will load faster. There is no optical drive on this. It is too small and too light for that. Asus went with Intel 8260 802.11 AC Wi-Fi with Bluetooth. That's currently the best Intel has to offer. No killer Wi-Fi here for those of you who like killer a little better, but the Intel actually performs pretty well, so I'm not going to complain about it, especially at a relatively reasonable for what you get kind of price tag here. Cooling, you can see from that internal shot that we had 2 fans, 2 large fans, lots of copper heat pipes, exhausts to the rear, so it's not going to blow hot air at your left hand like some designs, and it pulls air in from the bottom. So, you know, putting it on a ventilated cooler pad is fine. I don't think you really need to run something with fans. It doesn't get all that hot, and you don't want to cause extra turbulence with the fans as they take in air from the bottom. Now, compared to the real skinny MSI Ghost and Stealth models, and even the Razer Blade 14-inch model, this one is a bit thicker. It has plastic bottom. It's aluminum on the top, brushed black aluminum, just like MSI's gaming laptops, but it doesn't get as hot, nor does it get as loud. It's not as quiet as something like a GT72 Dominator 17-inch or the Asus G752. Those really big chassis are even cooler and quieter, but I could actually game on my lap. Typically, and it's summertime, so it's not exactly a cold room, the bottom was about 105 degrees maximum. So it's warmer than body temperature, we're talking Fahrenheit, but it's not burning hot. It's not like the 129 degree MSI. And you'll hear the fans. It's not as quiet, again, as something like a big G752 from ASUS, but it's not nearly as loud as the Ghost and Stealth. So it's kind of a nice compromise. If you want something that's pretty portable, but you don't want to have it screaming and burning your lap and you worry about how long it's going to survive given the heat, well, this one's just right. Ports for a 15-inch laptop are pretty good. We have a rarity, HDMI 2.0, so you can drive a 4K monitor at 60 hertz instead of just at 30 hertz. And we have, of course, the usual mini DisplayPort 1.2, USB-C Gen 2, but not Thunderbolt 3 here. Sorry, folks. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Ethernet, gigabit Ethernet built in, and plenty of USB 3.0 ports, as well as your usual audio jack. So it's pretty well equipped to handle most anything you're going to throw at it in terms of ports. And, of course, there's an SD card slot as well. When it comes to competitors, this thing doesn't exist in a vacuum. Again, well, obviously we have the MSI Stealth line. We just reviewed the 15-inch model that replaces the Ghost. Thinner? Yes. Hotter and louder? Also, yes. Available with similar display qualities and all that sort of thing. And typically a little bit, it depends on the configuration you get, a little bit more expensive, but pricing is close. There's the new 15.6-inch MSI Dominator, the G262 GT, 62 VR, but that's 6.5 pounds and more money too. So it's not really exactly what you'd call a thin and light 15-inch still. There are models like the Gigabyte P35XV6. That's pretty similar, and it has a 1070, which is unusual in something this size. That's 5.3 pounds. But it's a more upscale configuration overall with the 4K display model going for around $2,300. So a bit more money you're looking at there. Then there's ASUS's own G552, which is really kind of more of a budget gaming laptop. It only goes up to the 1060. It's not really up to the same specs as the 752 model, which is the 17-inch Rogue. That's the heavy-duty serious gamer, but it's also over 9 pounds, so I wouldn't call that one a direct competitor. Lastly, there's the Razer Blade 14, which will be updated to the 1060M. Prettier, sure, aluminum everywhere, classier chassis, more expensive too. And if you want a smackdown with these models, shout out in the comments and we'll see if we can make that happen for you. The display on our model, and most typically available, is the 1920 by 1080 matte IPS display. This is a non-touch display, typical of a gaming laptop, and it has pretty good color gamut, 95% of sRGB and 72% of Adobe RGB. That's good enough for professional photo work, and the calibration is pretty good. The only thing that was not as good as it could be was contrast. Calibration will help bring out the detail in the blacks if you calibrate it. Probably that's also because gamma's a little bit low at 2.0 to 2.1 on the curve, depending on where you're looking at that gamma curve. And the white balance is perfect at 6,800 Kelvin. It's pretty bright too, 300 nits of brightness. Combine that with the fact that it's matte, so you're not getting glare and reflections. It's very visible. Black levels are 0.47 at maximum brightness, which is pretty good. That resulted in a 6:10:1 contrast ratio, also pretty darn good. And if you drop the brightness down, the contrast ratio actually will go up a little bit because the black levels drop down pretty quickly. Keyboard and trackpad, typically they're very good on the ASUS ROG models, and I like the feel of this. It's crisp, it's well damped, 1.6 millimeters of key travel. It's pleasant enough. With scissor keys, although I couldn't tell that they were scissor keys, but ASUS says that. The trackpad actually works pretty well. It's a little bit noisy if you're a heavy tapper. It's obviously a buttonless design one, but it tracks well. It's reliable. It gets the job done. It doesn't make me scream for a mouse when I'm using the laptop for productivity. For gaming, of course, you're going to use a mouse or a controller anyway. Obviously, the keyboard has red backlighting. It's not one of those chroma multicolored ones, and the WASD keys are bright, zingy orange, just like the little bit of logo touch artwork that's on the lid. It's not overdone on the lid, but it's there, and it's so darn zingy and bright. That orange, yes, it will light up when the display is on, but it's so bright anyway, you can hardly tell the difference. And then you even get rubber orange feet on the bottom. Hey, I like orange, so I'm okay with it, but for some people it might not be understated enough. The black brushed aluminum top helps. In terms of performance, well, this thing is just about off the charts when it comes to graphics tests. The 1080 would be the highest and obviously in the series, and it's kind of equivalent to the NVIDIA Titan graphics card right now, because the 1070 in this is equivalent to the old 980 series in terms of where it stands in the hierarchy. In terms of performance, you're looking at literally 40% more, sometimes even better. It's just phenomenal. Even the lower end 1060, which should also be available with this particular Rogue model, is a serious outperformer compared to the 9 series graphics cards that it's replacing. And here's our full listing of benchmark results and a comparison graph, so you can see how it stands up against some last generation models and the current generation MSI Stealth Pro 15.6-inch model. So let's talk a little bit more about the NVIDIA graphics. That's the Pascal generation, replacing Maxwell for those who follow it. And as ever, if you want G-Sync, you can have Optimus. G-Sync is what matches the graphics card frame rate output to the refresh rate of the display. In this case, we have G-Sync on board here, which is pretty darn awesome. It reduces visual tearing quite a lot. This is a 60 hertz panel, so it will match your frame rates accordingly, so 60 frames per second. You can disable G-Sync if you want to, but I recommend against it. You might still not see tearing because this thing can output pretty high frame rates. But then again, you can also far exceed it. You can hit the 80s and the 90s in some games. It's just crazy. I was playing Battlefield 4 on ultra settings and seeing like 185 frames per second. Right? You're wasting your GPU's horsepower there. If this display can only refresh at 60 hertz, there's no point. Now, if you have an external 144 hertz monitor that you're going to use, that's a different story. So when you have the G-Sync feature, you can have Optimus. You can't have it automatically switching graphics card. That's just the state of the technology right now. What that means is it's always using dedicated graphics, even if you're just surfing the web, working in Word and all that sort of thing. What does that also mean? Don't expect stunning battery life. Now, gaming laptops typically don't have them, though the Dell XPS 15, which barely could be called a gaming laptop, and the Razer Blade 14 do have better battery life. They're what you should look at, even if you don't get the graphics performance, if battery life is really important to you. I managed 3.3 hours of streaming Netflix full HD video to give you an idea of battery life. Doing productivity work, web browsing, Word, that sort of thing. Likewise, you could get about 3.5 hours. Gaming, you're going to get about an hour. That's just how this laptop rolls, like most gaming laptops. The battery is nominally sealed inside. If you unscrew the 10 screws on the bottom Phillips head, you can access the 4-cell 65 watt-hour battery. Now, it ships with a 180-watt power adapter, and that worried me a little bit because the power requirement for the GPU plus the CPU are really pushing it a little bit above 180 watts. That said, the power adapter does get hot, but it hasn't throttled because of power, and I haven't seen charging drop even when I've been playing Fallout 4, The Division, games like that for long periods of time. So there it is. A 230 watt adapter with the 1070 might have been nice, but we get the 180 watt and it is doing its job, so I guess I'm okay with it. So that's the Asus ROG Strix GL502, the new edition for this second half of 2016, let's call it, with the new NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070 inside. It's also going to be available with the 1060 as far as we've heard. So there'll be a bunch of configurations if you're okay with a little bit less horsepower, you want to spend less money. Asus usually has a couple of configurations, but overall it's an amazing amount of horsepower in a very portable chassis. And it's a smart design compared to something like, say, the MSI Ghost and Stealth designs, which are really neat. They're really ultra thin, but they get so hot and loud. This one, just by adding that bit of thickness here, it's amazing what a difference it makes. Not nearly as hot, not nearly as loud. It's pretty tolerable. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.